from thousands of Americans that have seen and know the truth, and I believe that, as I do, that my husband was murdered intentionally and deliberately and with malice. My lawyer has assured me that we will seek justice in a different court under different circumstances, and I look forward to the day when these men do face a jury that is unbiased enough to return a fair verdict. After the funeral, rallies spontaneously began to organize in many states. The organizers counted possibly as many as 1,000 rallies took place throughout the country in every state but Rhode Island. It has been asked how this movement got such momentum so quickly. When Americans heard the details of this story and how these American patriots who have no criminal record and who have stood on the same interpretation of the U.S. Constitution as Justice Scalia have been treated, the actions of law enforcement and the FBI have shocked the conscience. Our Supreme Court has set as the standard guideline for practices of law enforcement that are unacceptable to our society as those that shock the conscience. A dead man's blockade with the intent to kill shocks the conscience. Shooting to kill with both hands up shocks the conscience. Violating the 8th Amendment, cruel and unusual punishment by placing Americans with no criminal record who are apparently guilty of defending the U.S. Constitution and the overreach of federal authorities into solitary confinement and then removing their constitutional right to bear arms are two examples of how elected and appointed officials in our court system, legislative body, and in the law enforcement are violating the rule of law. The Supreme Court has referred to solitary confinement as being violently insane. The court has recognized that solitary confinement tortures our human brain and diminishes our God-given strength to overcome obstacles. Solitary confinement is a form of torture that often drives the incarcerated mad.
Probably doesn't look like it.
Last year, a Supreme Court justice wrote a concurring opinion that described the history of solitary confinement, saying the practice bears a peculiar mark of infamy in its ability to shatter the minds and spirits of their prisoners. Who are we? We are outraged that men and women who have no criminal records and who pose no threat during the protest in Oregon are being treated as mere animals. The American people are outraged at this inhumanity, this brutality, this barbarism by the courts and law enforcement. It has created a new American awakening from both the left and the right. It shocks our conscience, and that is why around 1,000 rallies spontaneously organized in support of my husband's assassination and these patriots who are being held as political prisoners. Again, my lawyer has assured me that we will seek justice in a different court under different circumstances. And we will be commenting on the FBI and the Duchamp County press release tomorrow after we review their findings. Thank you so very much for coming.
Thank you.
What are the plans for tomorrow?
Federal agents made arrests in 6 states, including Utah, yesterday morning, gathering up supporters of Nevada rancher Cliven Bundy for their participation in a 2014 armed standoff with the federal Gestapo. In all, 12 men were arrested yesterday, including 2 of Bundy's sons, David Harold Bundy, age 39, of Delta, Utah, and his brother, Melvin D. Bundy, age 41, of Round Mountain, Nevada. Now, these men, ladies and gentlemen, are 2 of the 14 children of Cliven Bundy of Bunkerville, who last month was arrested and indicted on 16 federal charges related to a standoff near his ranch as part of a long-running dispute with the Bureau of Land Management. And this morning on the airwaves of the Twister, we have Brianna Bundy. She is the wife of Melvin Bundy, who has joined us on the telephone from her location. And Brianna, first off, we want to welcome you to the airwaves of KSTZ and KDJL. And I want to thank you very kindly for joining us here this morning. And Brianna, if you would give us an update, give us your story. What has happened out there, for crying out loud?
Well, they're stopping at nothing to prove a point. In America, we sit down and we shut our mouths and we do what we're told. They've made it pretty evident. I mean, yesterday, I'll tell you what extreme measures they go to. We moved back to Mesquite after Lavoy was killed to be here close by the ranch. We're just a few miles away in this next little town. Anyways, my husband hasn't been working because there's been a lot of work to do on the ranch. So he's been working, just not getting paid for it. My brother-in-law swung by our house 3 days ago and needed some help putting a hay pivot in down by Phoenix. So my husband didn't have anything going on for the next 3 days, so he's like, yeah, I'll hop in and go with you. They took off. They got down to Phoenix, and the following morning, they got in late. Following morning, they're out in the middle of the hayfield, and some man walks up to them and says, is this such and such ranch? And they were like, yeah, what's it to you? And one of the guys from Idaho said, well, I'm sorry, I don't understand what you're saying. Nobody here speaks Arizona. And they laughed, and the guy didn't think it was funny. They're like, man, he's, kind of ornery. So anyways, they ignored him. And then a little bit later, they started seeing some airplanes flying over, and they're like, that's kind of strange. And then a few minutes later, they saw these vehicles driving around, and they thought, man, this guy must be loaded to have all this ranch help, because they were just regular old vehicles, but no reason for them to be out there. Anyways, pretty soon, my brother-in-law said that all of the vehicles just swarmed in, and guys started barreling out, and there was lasers pointed all over them, and they were yelling, get down on the ground. So they all got down on the ground, and instantly, they threw my husband. They took him to the ground, and they took my brother-in-law to the ground. And then they separated them from each other. And then one of the guys from Idaho said, well, before that, Rustin said, are we even allowed to speak? Well, they read him as right. He's like, so am I being arrested? And they wouldn't answer him. So then they start taking Mel off, and one of the guys says, well, can you at least wait to take him until we get the job done? Because he's kind of obligated here, and we're kind of relying on him. And they didn't think that was funny, so they roughed him up a bit. Then they held my husband off. It says on Maricopa County's website that he was working there at 11:15 a.m. I know for a fact that my husband was still driving around at 1:50 p.m. because he called me from the back of a car saying, they told me to call you and tell you that I'm fine and that I love you. And then he hung up. So what was he doing all day? It's 40 minutes into the prison right there that he's looked at. So what took him, he didn't even finally get in and get booked until late yesterday afternoon. And then they have him just laying on a piece of concrete. No bed, no blanket, nothing. He said he's cold, but his spirits are high. And he said, get to work, America, because this is what is happening. And I will sit in here and I will rot until my last day on this earth. But you guys have an opportunity to do something. So pull your heads out, get educated, and get to work. That's his message to the people.
Well, help me understand something here. Now, this took place in Arizona, right?
Right.
Okay, so where was the Arizona sheriff involved in all of this?
Well, it would be nice to know that too, because I know Sheriff Arpaio, he claims ultimate jurisdiction in his county. So
right.
He's always crying that he's going to stand up and protect his citizens in his county from, a tyrannical government and an invading force. And he did no such thing yesterday. And I'm sure he'll play dumb like the one from Mallard County in Utah where Davey was taken. They claim they didn't know nothing about it. They didn't have a warrant for him in Maricopa County yesterday at 2 p.m. if they didn't have every intention of standing down.
Well, I don't understand what has happened here. I mean, the Gestapo evidently can go anywhere they want, and for some reason, the sheriff in the county where this takes place, who touts himself out as a constitutionalist, has put his tail between his legs and run pretty hard, it sounds to me like.
Right. Well, I forgot to bring this up a second ago. 3 nights ago, we were staying at the hotel while we were getting moved into our place. We weren't quite ready to move in yet. And there kept being two guys banging on my hotel room door. And so finally I answered the door with the 9mm and asked them what the hell they wanted and if they would quit banging on my door, and they wouldn't look at me. And I said, what are you guys, FBI or something? And the one guy turned and looked at me and laughed. Well, then now we find out that the FBI has been following my husband for 2 days before he left to Arizona. And the reason why they didn't pick him up is because they knew it would cause a scene if they took him in front of his children. So they don't want America getting mad. They're not going to come in and get him when they have the opportunity, because if people see the abuses that are taking place to our children, then they'll get angry and they'll rise up against them. But I'm going to tell you this, America, that they are abusing these children. I had to watch 5 little baby girls cry themselves to sleep last night because they don't understand why their daddy is in jail.
Well, I guess
So they are abusing our children.
I'm having a little trouble understanding that myself, to be very honest with you. And it sounds like these indictments, I mean, there's 14 individuals, that have been gathered up already here. And it sounds like there's a whole lot more to come.
Oh, absolutely. You speak, they will silence you. And one way or the other, they'll shoot you dead like they did Lavoie, where they'll gather you up 22 months later for standing on the side of the road and talking to Fox News. That's what they do. Don't you dare speak out. Don't you dare cause a ripple. Don't you dare get out of line, because we have eminent domain. That's what they have claimed over and over, and I have heard it out of their mouths. I mean, come on, America. Eminent domain. They own your house. They own your car. They own your person. They own your children. They own the earth. So it's time for you to rise up, or they're going to prove it.
Well, they are proving it little by little here. And the thing that I don't comprehend, obviously, a badge gives them the right to kill. That's all there is to it. It's a license to kill. But the thing that I don't comprehend here is that when I look at these different situations, obviously they come extremely well armed. They have their guns pointed at everybody else, and all of a sudden, if you point a gun back at them, or even if you open your mouth and say, hey, wait a minute, you all of a sudden are the bad guy, but it looks to me like they are the terrorists. That's the color that it shows to me anyway.
Well, and it is pretty ridiculous. I mean, on Davy, he's over there building a house for his family to live in because the feds have already destroyed his life down here where he's at by constantly pulling his flying badge and because he's a commercial pilot and a flight instructor. So they torment him in this area. So he moved away. He built him a house. He's trying to raise a family the best he can and provide for him. He's been working on his house, and they throw in 50 of those smoke bombs, you know what I'm talking about, that gas you out of there, and harassed the heck out of him. His guy that was coming to lay tile for him, they knew him by his first name, and they were, and Rustin said the same thing. He's like, they kept asking me what my affiliation was to Mel Bundy, but they knew me and all my workers' names, so clearly they knew my affiliation with the man.
Why, sure.
I mean, they are spending so much resource and so much manpower to take one man. I mean, it seems quite excessive if you ask me, because my husband has never been violent. I mean, he's maybe kicked a dog a time or two for, getting into something that shouldn't. But he is a good man. He has never resisted. He respects the proper jurisdiction. And if you ask Rustin, when those U.S. Marshals said, Mel Bundy, we're here to serve you, he cooperated fully. He did everything they asked. Rustin said that he was extremely impressed because he said, I was stirring. And Mel was very polite. He was very respectful. He put his hands behind his back, and he went with them.
Well,
These are not violent men. If they were violent, they would have a record to prove it.
When we speak of violent men here, I want to take you back and take the listening audience back to an interview that I did with Ammon Bundy. That has been some weeks ago here on the Twister. And I'll be honest with you people, I don't think that I have interviewed a man that was more calm and more sane and on spot than Ammon was. His thoughts were well thought out. They were laid out very well for the listener to comprehend. And then I go back even further to a telephone conversation that I had with a pointy-toed, hairy-legged cowboy down here in the South Sandhills here in Nebraska, and he made the comment on the airwaves of this radio station one time. He said, "Who are you afraid of, Ammon Bundy or the federal government?" And
Right.
he brought out a very, very valid point here. But when I look at what is going on and has gone on here, I say to myself, Americans, you better, I don't know whether I want to say wake up, because I don't know that we can get America to wake up.
Right. They're blind and they're deaf and they have hardened their hearts and they are just content to be controlled. Just like they say, sacrifice all of your freedoms for a little bit of security, and people are completely fine with that.
You know, the thing that almost puzzles me, and this would be a side note, but that it almost puzzles me when I go back and think about the Bundy standoff, if you will, back here a couple of years ago. I say to myself, when I look at all of the quote-unquote animal abuse that was involved there, that the feds perpetrated against the herd of cattle, if you will, the 400 and some cows that they rounded up, those that they literally ran to death and then tried to bury them and cover them up, if you will, cover up the evidence. I say to myself, okay, bunny huggers out there, how come you aren't standing up and raising a little H over this too? Because if you or I did that same kind of thing that the government did, they'd have us locked up for that.
Well, and that's the thing. And, you know, during our standoff down there, because it was calving season and it was hot and we knew, I mean, these moms were having babies on the run, dropping babies while they were running, and then their babies were being left to be eaten by coyotes. I mean, these are despicable actions. They were shooting them out of helicopters, shooting them off their horses. These contract cowboys were disgusting, little cute. Excuse my lack of better terms there.
I'll be honest with you. You're holding your tongue much better than I would be able to had I been involved in that kind of a deal, because it doesn't make any sense to anyone that has any common sense at all.
Right. And, you know, we called PETA. We called the ASPCA. We called all these little, you know, as you call them, I love that term, bunny huggers. And, I mean, we call them turtle herders and everything else. But, you know, that's exactly, you want to know what they said? We can't get involved. And they said, okay, why don't you go spend $2 million rescuing some kitty out of the storm drain then? Because if that's where you're spending your resources, all this money that all these people are donating to you, because they really think they're doing good, like, let's save the little animals of this land. That doesn't, somewhere in your fine print, you've excluded cattle, because those seem to me that they're animals.
Yeah, I would
they don't care. They're not going to get involved. They're paying half those politicians that were doing that roundup. They don't care about the animals. They care about the money and the control and the power. That's all they care about.
You know, when you speak of money here, and I think of the tens upon hundreds of thousands of dollars that has been spent already, and this has just got started. I mean, this will continue to go on. You would think the American taxpayers at some point would go, quit piddling our money down a rat hole here.
Oh, they don't care. They're, you know, this is what I found. It doesn't matter what class you come from in this country, you are flat broke, and you go to work just to survive. I don't care if you're bringing in 12 figures a year or 4 figures a year. You are just as broke as the next guy, because they are finding a way to rob it from you. And people are so busy just trying to survive in this country, they don't have the energy to fight back even if they wanted to. Well, I'm going to tell them this. I have sacrificed every dime that I have. I have sacrificed my children's security. And now I've sacrificed my husband and my home to live in a little teeny travel trailer and press forward. And I am telling you this right now, America, if every single person would have the same dedication to something that they believe in so strongly, we would live in a different country. But freedom is worth fighting for me, and it is worth fighting for from my family, and we will not sit down, we will not shut up. And as far as I'm concerned, they have poked the bear, and they do not want to see. My husband is calm, he is collect, he is rational, and he is polite and kind. Those things, I am not. And that's why we make a pretty good team, because we balance each other out. But he's gone now. I don't have anyone to rein me in. So I'm thinking right now that the FBI took the wrong person, because I will raise hell all over this country and tell all of you, get off the couch, You turn off your television and you get to work. We've got to start being productive, because otherwise they're coming to your house and they're coming to your house and they're coming to your house, and they will not stop until they own your person, your belongings, your home, your life, until they have eminent domain. How does that sound, America? Eminent domain.
You know, and I think I think you're making some very, very valid points there, Brianna. I know even here in Nebraska, we know that the feds are here, and we know that there's a gigantic aquifer underneath this state. Water already is a gigantic battle in this state, and it will continue
Water
on.
is life.
And plain and simple, listeners, each of you have to draw your own conclusions here, but Brianna has brought forth some very valid points. We can